Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Let's talk about one of my favorite topics ever, masturbation. While masturbation is not a dirty word, it's not uncommon to feel shame and guilt when it comes to self-pleasure. This is due to a combination of cultural norms, religious influences, lack of meaningful media representation, harmful myths we all learned in sex ed, and more. But masturbation should be talked about in a positive light, and we should be honest about the very real positive impacts it has for people, especially for women and people with vulvas. That's why I decided to take pleasure into my own hands, figuratively and literally, with a magic wand masturbation experiment. In a nutshell, I wanted to answer one question. What is the impact of daily magic wand use on my health and wellness, as well as my sexual experience, when compared to regular sexual activity and no sexual activity? Want to see how the experiment unfolded? Check out sexedwithdb.com/magicwandexperiment now. Here are my top 3 favorite things I love about Uberlube. Number 1, Uberlube makes sex feel a lot more pleasurable. It's as simple yet as powerful as that. Number 2, Uberlube is recommended by leading doctors, and its body-friendly ingredient list is widely used by people with sensitivities to lubricants. And number 3, Uberlube will not stain clothing or bedding. Any spills can be easily cleaned with detergent and water. Get your bottle of Uberlube now with code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at uberlube.com. Are you falling into a pattern with your partner? Looking to spice things up but aren't sure how? Me and my partner exit our ordinary with Lion's Den. Lion's Den has hundreds of your favorite brands to help you and your partner reconnect or try something new. From novices to dungeon masters, there are products for every comfort level. With 50 plus years in business, Lion's Den is here to help. Can't make it to a local store? Shop online and chat with a customer service team member while you shop. Lion's Den offers our listeners 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com.
Are you ready for the Unleashed Tour, where shamelessness, sexiness, and laughter collide in a hilarious orgy of fun, discovery, and sex edutainment? Embark on a captivating nationwide journey with the Shameless Sex podcast and an electrifying ensemble of sex educators and sex-positive entertainers as they bring you an unforgettably titillating live experience. Be a part of mesmerizing, entertaining, boundary-pushing acts, Shameless Sex style. Ever heard of the Slurpee stick shift? Want to learn how to bury your face in her? How about some dirty talk improv or brat taming 101?
Get ready for nonstop laughter as our charismatic hosts and entertainers weave humor into the fabric of this liberating celebration of sexual diversity and freedom. Engage in interactive segments, Q&A sessions, and a chance to connect with like-minded individuals in an inclusive and empowering environment. Listen up, Portland, Chicago, Seattle, we're coming to you. For more information and to get your tickets right now, go to shamelesssex.com and be part of a night that will be fun, educational, sexy, hilarious, and shamelessly unforgettable. Seats are filling up fast, so don't miss out on the most unforgettable show of the year.
Hello, Sex Ed with DB listeners. I am thrilled that it is Pride Month, and today we get to chat with a very, very special human named Cody Daigle-Orians. And Cody is just such a phenomenal person. They are a writer and asexuality educator. They are the creator of ACE Dad Advice, a social media-based asexuality education project that helps asexual folks and those who are questioning live their best ACE lives. Their first book, I Am ACE, is out now, and their second book, The ACE and ARO Relationship Guide, comes out in October 2024. We chat so much about all things ACE in this episode, and they are just so warm and so the parent that you wish that you had when it comes to queer and ACE conversations and information. We talk all about Cody's ACE identity and the way that they engage with the folks that follow them online. We talk all about this really great listener question towards the end of the episode where what happens when two people are on different pages and one of them has a different sex drive than the other person and one of them identifies as ace or is questioning that and the other one doesn't. So make sure you stay tuned for that really great conversation. I feel like there was a great moment at the end there where I was educated in the best way by them, and I really welcomed it because of how sweet and sincere and intentional they were. And so, yeah, I am excited for you to hear this wonderful, wonderful episode. And make sure you follow Cody at ACE, ACE, Dad Advice, all one word. And without further ado, here I am with Cody. Hello, Cody. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I am so good. You have such a lovely aura about you just already. I've seen...
Well,
oh,
thank you.
Just the pause of the, little old me. Yeah, I love your glasses. I love kind of like the blue glow in the background. It's giving an energy that I like.
It is the energy of like someone in their late 40s trying to be a YouTuber and like doing being on the internet. Like, yeah, that's the vibe I'm trying to serve over here.
Dear my fellow kids, as they say.
I am that meme come to life for sure.
Correct. Well, it's working for you. I am so glad to meet you. I'm really excited to have you on because we're talking all things ACE today, and it is Pride Month. And so I'm very excited to get some ACE representation and talk all about your resources and your education. And before we get into that, we have a segment called The Quick and Dirty, where I ask you 3 questions to get to know you, and I'll answer them too, just so you don't feel alone in this. I'll get a chance as well to share my opinions here. But I want to know from you, what is one thing that you wish everyone learned in sex ed? And I know this is hard. There are a million things, but if there was one thing you boiled it down to that every single kid in America, let's say, could learn in sex ed, what would that be?
I mean, right out of my like ACE world, that sex is great, but not necessary. I wish like that we if we could teach people that, yes, you want to have all the options that are possible for having the sexual life that you want, but none is also one of those options. It is also a valid option, and it's one that you can choose. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or broken about you.
That's really lovely. It is great and not necessary. Yeah. Before I even hopped on here, I was talking to a friend of mine and saying, I occasionally teach in middle schools and high schools. And in middle schools, when we're talking about queer identities, a lot of the middle schoolers would be like, well, yeah, I'm ace. And I'll be like, yeah, like maybe you are. And maybe like you're just not sure yet. And that's okay too.
Maybe you're figuring it out. Yeah, for sure. But that's wonderful that they have that language. Like, totally. Wow, middle schoolers. Also,
this is very specific to a Brooklyn private school bubble, I will say, when I was teaching in Brooklyn. So, they're kind of in this very unique zone, I think. I don't think it's representative necessarily of the rest of the country, but I think it's cool that young people feel empowered to say, like, I want to explore queer identities and feel how those labels feel for me, depending on how my identity feels. And that is empowering, and that's cool.
As someone who's old enough to not have any of that, like, it's wonderful to see.
Yeah, it's unique, but it shouldn't be, right? Hopefully that's changing and there's more ability for people to see themselves in the education that they're being taught in school. I think one thing for me, I've answered this question before, and it does change and shift over time, but I think like the most important thing for me to convey to kids and young people in sex ed is that like their body is awesome. I think there's so much shame and misunderstanding when it comes to our bodies are ugly, weird, a different color than they should be. My nipples are strange. Like my genitalia sucks. Like I think there's, it's the classic like Mean Girls scene of like my nail beds suck. They're like in the mirror, like talking about everything that they hate about themselves. She's like, I have really bad breath in the morning. Like, we're kind of like pushed to make our bodies feel less than. And if all kids just knew like your body is, nobody else has that body and it's really, really awesome how it is, then I think that's my one thing.
I love that. Yes. Like snaps to that.
Snaps. Yes. The second question I have is, what's your favorite example of ACE representation in the media right now?
Favorite example of, well, I would probably say an actual person. So I think Yasmin Benoit is doing absolutely incredible work being an outspoken and wonderful advocate for all things ACE. I really appreciate that she uses her own story and her own life as a foundation for the work that she does, but she's also really working very diligently to create a space where it's not just about validity, but also about legislative equality and actually like changing the practical ways that ACE people are living in the world. And I find that pretty incredible. So yeah, Yasmin, I think she's wonderful representation.
Yes, she's been on the scene for quite a while too. And I think that like her voice is very loud and very intentional. And I think that that's super important when it comes to ACE representation in all forms of media, of just someone who's like really unashamed to say, this is who I am. This is what I look like. And this is my identity. And yeah, I like the advocacy piece there. It's really critical. My answer, I think, would be a character who is in the show Sex Education. Her name is O. I'm not sure if you've seen that. I'm sure, there aren't that many like pop media ACE representation. So right now, I think there are more now than ever. But I do think, that final season of Sex Education, they do a really good job of really putting O's story as like a flawed human being who also is ACE at the forefront. And she's just a compelling character. She's like kind of conniving. She's interesting. She's really smart. She's very relatable. And she also is ACE. And I think that instead of, making the whole character like she is one dimensional, she is only ACE, she is an entire person, which I really liked.
Yeah, I always think in queer representation, when you reach that moment where your particular queer identity is being shown in a way of like that person is not perfect, that's not like an angelic version of that queer identity, you're getting somewhere. Like, yeah, like we can have a dubious gay person, a dubious ACE person. That's possible. So it's good to see that reflected in the world.
Totally. Yeah. And my last question for the quick and dirty is, what is your biggest sex ed hot take right now or ever, if you have one?
Probably just in my world that you can talk about ACE and ARO existence even to young kids. I think there's a real reluctance to even sort of introduce asexuality because it is about sex and our relationship to sex and sexual attraction to really young kids. But I think, as with all identities, there are ways to talk about aceness in a way that is understandable and age appropriate. I actually I have a picture book out right now about it's on submission right now. That's an ACE and ARO picture book that introduces that to kids in the picture book age range.
Love it.
I think we can talk about these identities and these experiences even at that age, even though it is relating to sex and sexual attraction and how we live our sexual lives.
I am so into that. I think as educators, we are kind of forced to kind of consistently be like age appropriate. Like the haters come at us hard all the time for saying, well, we don't want our kindergartners to learn about intercourse. And it's like, yeah, that's not actually the curriculum that they would learn. I feel like it's really important to talk about it in the context of, health education. Then when we hit puberty, then it becomes sexuality education and so on. And I think for younger kids, right? Kids start asking questions when they start talking. And if we're not equipped to answer those questions honestly, openly, and with love and understanding, then what are we doing, right? We as parents and caregivers, we have to prep ourselves. And I think a picture book and something you can read and learn along with your kids is perfect.
And I think it's incredibly important for us to be introducing all of the possibilities as soon as we can, really getting young people to understand, even the very youngest people, that there are many ways to be in the world, that what you might see regularly in TV or movies represents a small portion of what real life looks like for a lot of people. introducing those ideas at a very early age really is just sort of showing them, here are all of the possibilities and you can go find your path. You may take multiple roads. You may like go down a road that's a dead end. You come back around, but like you have all of those paths available to you, and it's not something you have to discover when you're 18 and like the pressure's on to kind of like be an adult in the world.
Totally. Yeah, I love it. I think my sex ed hot take right now, and this is kind of like an interesting one, is that like once your kid hits 16, if you feel comfortable, you should be talking to them about sex toys, because I think that that to me feels like a hot take, but I think it's so obvious the more as a sex educator that I engage with the discussions around pleasure, masturbation, feeling good in your body. I think we have this like weird legal idea of like legally you can't watch porn until you're 18, and like it's kind of dubious whether or not there's no law technically in the books that says like you can't buy a sex toy if you're under 18, not at least in the state of California. And so I think it allows us this like false dichotomy of like when you're 17 and 3/4, that's too young, but when you're 18, go sign up for the army, get cigarettes, like go watch porn and buy a sex toy. And I just feel, especially for people with vulvas and women identifying folks and queer folks, when they're teenagers, we're not really empowering them as much as we can when it comes to sex toys. Plus, for folks with disabilities, like there is a very real potential issue with accessing pleasure that certain folks, depending on their abilities. And so my hot take is that 16-ish feels like an appropriate age to say, hey, I want to teach you or like this thing about sex toys, or I want to share some resources. And like, if you're interested, like you can pick one, and like, let's talk about when it's appropriate to use it. Let's talk about how to clean it. Like, I think that if more young people had access to sex toys earlier on, then when they hit these milestones and when they went to college, they wouldn't be dependent on other people to learn how to feel good in their bodies, and they would just know on their own.
Yeah, I love that, because it really respects that someone who is 16 or 17 knows more than we give them credit for. Like they are in this world, so they are understanding things about sex and their bodies and how that relates with other people, far beyond what I think we generally culturally give them credit for. It isn't like someone turns 18 and all of a sudden all of those lights go on and then they know things. I mean, they're in this world and they're seeing it. So I think that's lovely. I love that, and making sure that all of those options are present. Here are all the ways in which you can sort of explore this world with your body, just by yourself, if you want to start there. I think that's lovely.
Yes. And if we also reframe it, like parents who are listening, would 16 be too young to talk to your child about birth control or protecting themselves against unwanted pregnancy and STIs? If you think that's appropriate, then we should wrap our heads around this idea that sex toys also should be part of the conversation, because it's about agency, it's about autonomy. In fact, the more likely they are to have access to sex toys and engage in masturbation, the less likely they are to potentially need to seek that from a partner. Like they are then willing and able to figure out what they like. And before they go out and seek that with a partner, then they're able to know how to protect themselves. They're able to know how to talk about what they like. They're able to communicate about these things.
Best kind of hot take. I love it. Yeah. Yes.
I'm so glad they were into that. I was a little nervous to be like 16, but I feel it. I feel that genuinely in my heart. Okay. So we're going to move on to talk about ACE dad advice. I found your platform a couple months ago, and I just love your approach to content. It is so warm, so welcoming, and it's really taken off and become a huge resource for the ACE community. And I wonder if you could just share the backstory of how it came to be, if there was a particular moment when you kind of realized that switch, that it was making a big impact in people's lives.
Yeah, so I'm a late bloomer when it comes to being ace. I didn't come out as asexual until I was 41. I'm 48 now. And when I first came out as ace, even though I had been out as a queer person since I was 18, I kept being ace pretty quiet. It was something that people knew I was queer, and I felt like, okay, well, that's fine. We don't need to get into all the new stuff that's showing up. The people in my intimate life know. Cool. So after coming out, I really kept that part of my life very private. 3 years ago, my barber told me I should download TikTok because I would like
Yeah,
have fun on
Barbara.
TikTok, right? Yeah, and I was like, "No, come on, Todd. No, I won't. What am I? That's for the kids. What am I gonna do?" But I did, and I was playing around on TikTok, and I made a video where I self-identified as an ACE person. And I went away for a few hours and returned to hundreds of messages and comments and thousands of new subscribers of people saying things like, "Wow, I never knew that ACE adults existed. I've never seen an ACE person that looked like you. I didn't know we could get old," which I mean, like I was like old, but yeah, but I get it. I get it. And so that resonated in me in this place where I know as a young queer person, when I first came out as gay at 18, it was older gay men who were mentors and elders in the community who made being gay possible for me as a young boy growing up in South Louisiana. So I saw this as an opportunity where like, oh, maybe there's a space for that same kind of presence in the ACE community, because if they're not seeing it, they need to know that a future's possible. And I have like a teacher skill set, and I was an actor. So like I can do all that stuff, and I'm a writer. So I was like, all right, well, let's see what happens if we start making stuff. And it's really just turned into this. It's turned into my work, and it's turned into an entirely new like career path for me and creative path for me. It's been wild. I still sometimes think it's very weird, and I can't believe that that's what I'm doing. But I certainly recognize that it fills a space, and it's a helpful project and a helpful space for people who are meeting asexuality for the first time. I did not encounter a lot of information about it, even when I was looking for it. So I try to make what I wish I had.
Yeah. And it's so clear that that's the approach. And I really relate to this idea of, same thing happened with Sex Ed with DB. I've been doing this podcast for about 7 years now, but in May 2020, when I graduated online from my Columbia grad school MPH program, I created a TikTok, and same thing, like the first video just kind of blew up, and it has become my work, my life's work now, and passion to create videos online for people to enjoy them, to laugh at them, to feel silly, to feel like engaging. Like I just saw a video of yours the other day where you're duetting someone or stitching someone, and you're like, first of all, that breakfast sandwich looks good. Like you're not just talking about. You're not.
I take that very seriously.
Honestly, same. And you're not just talking about ACE content. You're like making people laugh. You're bringing them in this like funny, engaging way. And I think that it's just such a wonderful way to make other people feel comfortable. And like you said, just allow them to be introduced to someone like you who maybe they haven't seen before. Maybe they have just never considered that is an option. And I just think it's wonderful what you're doing. So I'm so happy about your content. Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And, like you said, you've shared a lot about your own identity journey online. And so if you have been out as a queer person since 18, kind of internally in your circles, out as ACE at 41, there's a large journey there, right? Of like how you kind of decided to be more out in public about your ACE identity. And I wonder if there is like a specific experience that really helped you understand and embrace your asexuality, and how you kind of figured out that identity label felt good for you.
I would probably say it has been the process of being so public about it that has really allowed me to fully inhabit being an ACE person. When I first came out at 41, it was because of Tumblr. So, I was like, Tumblr. Now I know. And I've been starting to sort of think a little bit about like what that process was like. Coming out originally for me was sort of a creative act. Like when I first came out at 18, I was inventing the person I was going to be in the world. I was building that person. But coming out at 41 as ACE and reconsidering all those things, it's like a revision of both who I am in the present and also who I've been for my whole life. And the first part of my ACE experience, I did that it was just for me, and it was just for me by myself, sort of in my life and in my small world, sort of doing that revision work and understanding myself in that way. Ace Dad Advice allows me to do that revision in public. I get to talk about my experience with both the positive parts of this journey, the challenging parts of this journey. I get to commiserate with people who are in the same space. I am connecting with other humans. And yeah, it has been the publicness of doing this that has allowed me to like really embody it, because I have to. I have to really know what I'm talking about for myself, right, to do this work. And yeah, like the publicness has been the kind of most impactful thing about like defining really fully what ACE means to me.
And have you, like, when people write in and ask questions because they're curious about your identities that you hold, is there kind of like a templated version? Just because I just feel like for myself, like, it can get really tiring and you can get really burnt out, like, answering everybody individually, and you want to make sure that people feel like they have your attention, but your time and your energy also are limited. So I'm just wondering, like, the way in which you kind of engage with folks and answer their questions, or kind of like, is it with a video? Is it with comments? Like, how do you kind of connect with the people who are on your platform?
It's sort of a combination of things. When I think about how what that process is like, there is just like something in me that sort of feels the degree of ACE Dad that a person needs. Like, for sometimes the questions are just rather simple, and I can answer that in a comment right on the post or whatever, or I'll be like, I'll make a video about it. Let's watch for that. Sometimes emails just feel more personal, and it's clear that that person needs just a little bit more of that, like, personal connection. So that's maybe an email response. It's a lengthier response. It's something more connected. But I agree. It's very challenging to balance that need of being present for the want to be present for people, and to do this work and like answer everyone's questions and provide the support they're asking for, but also reserve like life and spoons for myself to live my life. I've kind of gotten to this place where I'm glad I came up with a project that created like a persona. Like, Ace Dad can exist separately from Cody, and even sometimes, like, as in Cody's life, I'm like, man, I wish Ace Dad was here, because that would be really helpful if Ace Dad could solve this situation. Yeah, but yeah, certainly. Like, I try to just sense what someone needs, and if I'm available to do that, I can do that. But I have gotten better about like boundaries for myself, and making that space where like Cody gets to live Cody's life while his dad stays on the TikTok.
Totally. Yeah. And I don't know if you relate to this, but for me, it is also important that, you know, I have a fiance and he did not sign up for this, right? So it's like, how do I make sure that, and he's very supportive, but like, he's not interested in being in the spotlight whatsoever. So it's like, how do I balance having a partner and talking about my own identity while also making sure I'm respecting his boundaries? I wonder if that comes up like for you and your partner, like how has that kind of like, you know, moved over time?
Oh yeah. So I have 3 partners.
Oh, okay. 3.
Yeah. So I'm married to my husband. I have another romantic partner. My husband has another romantic partner, and we are a 4-person family. And yeah, part of what I do in ACE Dad Advice is talk about my life, and like the education comes through lived experience. And so I have to share my lived experience around relationships and sex and love and all of those things. So they're all very supportive. I try not to talk too much about the specifics of all of our lives, because they also did not sign up for the internet.
Right.
But they're also very supportive, and are happy to be acknowledged, and to like, they know that they're part of the ACE Dad universe, and they're cool with that. None of them feel compelled, or I never try to compel them to be in videos or anything, because I think that would be like a very fruitless effort. Yeah, it's a tricky balance sometimes.
Totally. Yeah. I wonder if you could talk about a common myth about asexuality that really drives you up a wall. Like, what do you keep hearing over and over again that you're just like, I'm going to pin this video to my content so that people really understand And how do you usually debunk it when you're talking to people?
I think the biggest one that I encounter all the time, both sometimes from ACE people and otherwise, is just the idea that asexuality only means someone who never has sex. Like that is the common cultural understanding of asexuality. And for many people who haven't encountered real ACE people or have not found us online, that is how they understand. Asexual means you never have sex. That is the opposite of the reality of asexuality, and that like in our community, being asexual can open up into a very wide range of relationships, relationship structures and styles, relationships to sex. Some have sex in their lives, some don't. That diversity, trying to make sure that people understand that the misconception is not the truth of us, and that asexuality is actually a really broad and diverse spectrum of experiences and lived lives of relationships and love and sex and all of those things.
Totally. I wonder, do you think that myth is perpetuated through media, through just people not understanding? Like, how do you think that happens? And like, how do we get people to understand the diversity of experiences?
It's hard it's hard for me to wrap my mind about like why we think that asexuality is only that. I just feel like it's one of those it's one of those like built into the way things have always been. I think our earliest depictions of or earliest like representations of asexuality in research, like when Kinsey was do research around human sexuality, people who did not have sex were designated X, and like that was like asexuality. From the like those roots of people who did not have sex were included into that particular category, and that is how we understood who they were. That you were either someone who was having sex in some kind of way, either an acceptable social way or a not acceptably social way, or you just weren't having it. I think a really great way to get people to understand us and understand that spectrum of experience is just to create more spaces for ACE people to talk about their lives. The internet has done a wonderful job of that. The internet democratizes the sharing of queer lives in a lot of different ways. And so to have so many different kinds of ACE people in internet space and in digital space talking about how they live their lives, great. But I think there are other ways in which we can do that too. I think other queer spaces that offer space for like queer folks to be seen, events at Pride, panels at a queer community center, including ACE people in those spaces too, and in those contexts, help debunk those myths about asexuality being just one thing. Because you're gonna, when you do gather ACE people together, it's like everyone has their own different flavor and understanding and version of living ACE-ness. And so you really get to see that spectrum that way.
Totally. I even am just kind of imagining a panel of like 5 people who are all on the ACE spectrum, and like and literally showing the spectrum, right? And it's only 5 out of hundreds, thousands of experiences. But it's more of like okay, this person only has sex under these circumstances, or this person like actually only has sex with a certain kind of person, and this person doesn't ever really want to have sex, like a very different range. And I think that is such an important way. And then you like talk to them about other things, right? It's like not similar to what we were talking about before, like not just the one dimensionality, but just showing here are 5 people. This is how they identify on the ACE spectrum. And here's what they love to eat for breakfast. I don't know. You know what I mean? Just like not only that.
Well, and even like I even think like just with ACE folks, you get a range of like different relations to queerness. So you can have ACE folks who otherwise consider themselves queer and are living queer lives. You can have ACE folks who are in what would appear to be like hetero relationships from the outside, who are married and have kids and have that whole like heteronormative life set up. That is even a wide range of different kinds of experiences that get depicted inside of asexuality.
Totally. Yeah. I'm wondering, for our last question of this segment, what would you tell a listener who's wondering or kind of just questioning, like, could I be asexual? Like, I'm just not really sure. I'm not positive. I might. Like, is there any advice that you have to help folks navigate through that uncertain period that they're going through?
I lean on what my experience was in finding asexuality. I think it is easy to go to Google and like Google what is asexual and get a definition, or get like an article that describes what it's like. The best way to really kind of work through that process yourself is to go find ACE people online who are talking about their lives. Go find books written by ACE folks, because you really get a better sense of whether or not asexuality has something to do with you if you're listening to people talk about what it has to do with them. What made it click for me was reading posts on Tumblr that were about people explaining their ACE life. What did ACE-ness look like in their lives and for them? In that, I was able to recognize myself. And so I think, like, if you're questioning, go find some ACE creators and just like watch their videos, or go find books that are written by ACE folks and see what really like resonates with you. How we live our experiences and live our identity was for me a more helpful way than just some dry definitions or like a checklist or like an informational article.
Yeah, the power that comes with someone sharing a story and you saying, that easily could be me, like to almost to a T, is very, very powerful for you to say like, wow, like I don't feel such shame. It kind of transforms, at least in my opinion, in my experiences, this phenomenon transforms shame into this feeling of belonging and community, and feeling like, oh, wow, like there are other people out there that are like me. This is so cool. And like, how brave of this person to be sharing this of them and giving us themselves. And that's what you do every day. So that's really, really neat that you're able to do that for other people.
Oh, yeah. I like just snaps to that. That's a beautiful sentiment, and exactly how it should work. I think if you just sort of like look at definitions or labels, that can feel very restrictive, and it can also feel like a demand. You have to fit this word, you have to fit this definition. But if you're making a connection with another human being who's like, hey, my life is this. Oh, is your life like that too? That's community, which is that is a better place. I would rather find myself in community than to find myself in like a definition.
Totally. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we know with identity and language that it is ever evolving. Like we didn't really have this language and this much community around these queer identities until the last like 10, 15, 20 years, depending on like where you're at. Still, people now are not able to access that depending on where they're living, culturally, what's going on, who were they raised by. Like there are so many different ideas as to how these people are able to access this language and claim it. And in 20 years, I'm sure we're going to be talking about different labels and additional things, right? Like language really is beautiful in that way, in that it is ever changing. And it's the same concept for us and our identities. Like we are evolving human beings, our sexualities, our identities can change over the course of our lifespan. And so, yeah, never feel like you need to be stuck in an identity label that's not serving you. But if it is feeling like that's adding to your life, adding to your community, adding to your experiences, then you should feel empowered to use it. I'm about to get personal here, so listen up. I'm going to tell you a fun fact about me that you definitely didn't know. The lube that I use most consistently is Uberlube. I really mean it. If you were here with me right now, I'd tell you to go over to my nightstand drawer and tell me what you see. That's right, you would see a bottle of Uberlube. If you've never heard of Uberlube, let me tell you about it. Uberlube is a silky smooth silicone-based lube recommended by leading doctors, and its body-friendly ingredient list makes it widely used by people with sensitivities to lubricants. Another amazing thing about Uberlube is that it doesn't leave a sticky residue like water-based lubes do. It lasts for a long time and doesn't stain clothing or bedding. I have 3 bottles of Uberlube on my bedside table right now, ready when I need it. If you're someone who wants to feel more pleasure in the bedroom, use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at uberlube.com. Trust me, it's amazing. Have you ever wondered why it hurts when you get your period? Here's a little anatomy lesson sponsored by Day, the new period care brand changing the game. During your menstrual period, your uterus contracts to expel its lining. Hormone-like substances, aka prostaglandins, involved in pain and inflammation trigger the uterine muscle contractions. Higher levels of prostaglandins are associated with more severe menstrual cramps. If you have painful periods, you are not alone. While painful periods are common, you should know that they aren't normal. Here's where the Period Pain Clinic by Day comes in. The Period Pain Clinic offers a 360-degree plan to tackle period pain with a personalized pain relief routine, support from vetted specialists, access to innovative treatments, fast-track diagnosis of gynecological health conditions, clinically proven lifestyle recommendations, and more. You'll also learn about conditions that could be affecting your period, such as PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis, and more. Go to www.yourday.com, that's DAYE, and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at checkout. Let me tell you about one of my favorite pleasure product retailers out there, Lion's Den. If you haven't heard about Lion's Den before, I can't wait to tell you about them. Lion's Den opened its first retail facility in Columbus, Ohio in 1971. That's right, over 50 years ago. Since then, they've grown to more than 50 outlets throughout the US, building their reputation on high-quality products, low prices, and a knowledgeable sales staff who can help you find the perfect toy. One of the many things I love about Lion's Den is that they advocate for a sex-positive perspective on intimacy and sexual well-being, and strive to break the stereotypes and stigma surrounding sex by providing comprehensive educational resources to empower everyone to enjoy life to the fullest. They are simply amazing. Lucky for you, Lion's Den is giving my listeners an exclusive discount of 15% off your purchase, in-store and online with code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com. What are you waiting for? Get your amazing Lion's Den toy now. You're so awesome. This is so great. We are going to move on to our next segment called The Buzz. And this is where we dive into a trending topic or article in sex education. And so, Cody, you recently made a TikTok responding to a New York Times piece called "Can a Sexless Marriage Be a Happy One?" And this article was written by Amanda Monte, and it explores the idea that sex isn't essential for a happy marriage. It shares stories of couples like Will and Rose who maintain strong, intimate connections despite having little to no sex. However, the article does not mention ace people at all. And so, can we break down why you think articles like this fail to mention the existence of asexuality and the experiences of ace folks?
Well, I think that when we think about married people, we assume that married folks are having sex. And so like the notion of an asexual person is not even going to like come into that picture to begin with, but also wrapped up in what we misunderstand about asexuality is the misunderstanding that if you're not having sex, then you're not seeking relationships. There is a huge idea that like ace means not just like you're not having sex, but also you're not having human relationships of any kind. You're just like sitting alone in a room somewhere in the dark, not bothering the world. And so it's hard for people, I think, to imagine an asexual person in that misconception as being part of a married unit or having kids or being like in the world that way, or much less like polyamorous. Like people's brains explode when I tell them sometimes that like I have multiple partners. They're like, well, how does that? What's going on?
Right.
I think like that's what I feel is like at the center of that misunderstanding.
I do think it's this like tricky thing, right? Because if you are a sexual person and you are in a marriage that there is no sex, but you're happy, that also breaks people's brains. People are just like, well, I don't get it. Like what is happening, or why isn't it happening? And yeah, I think it's so wrapped up too in pleasure, in dynamics, in the way we relate to ourselves and to others. Like, ace folks may like enjoying masturbation, but maybe they don't want to have sex with a partner, right? So that doesn't mean that they're completely non-sexual people. It just means that there are kind of limits or boundaries as to what their sexual experiences are going to look like. And yeah, I just think that it is really interesting to think through how we have set up this kind of like staircase model of like, well, if you're going to be a sexual person and you're going to probably at the same time want a relationship, if you're also romantic, and then, the idea is like, well, how much sex are other people? And, you know, we're always just constantly comparing ourselves in our relationships to other people. And so it's just kind of this like mind fuck of there's so much going on here.
And what I found particularly frustrating about that piece was and about the exclusion of ace couples or ace people from that is that ace couples are dealing with this question of what does a sexless relationship look like, and how do you navigate that, and how do you make that work, and how do you make each an ace relationship work? How does an ace allo relationship work? Those couples could provide information, education, context, and like lived experience within that that's not framed in our marriage, you know, we're allo folks, so we should be having sex and we're not, and it's like a problem to be solved. I talk about for ace folks in relationships that you should always think about your asexuality as not a problem to be solved. It is not something to apologize for. It's not an obstacle. It's just part of what you bring to the table. And having that perspective there, like a relationship that is sexless is just what's brought to the table, and it's not a problem to solve. That opens up a whole world of ways to relate to your partner, or to build a relationship, or to think about things like pleasure and intimacy and connection, which could be very useful in those contexts.
Yeah, if anything, we're learning that like ace folks and queer folks, which we know, right, for multiple reasons, but like are kind of forced into becoming better communicators because they don't have as many cultural scripts and ideas as to what their relationships or their sexual experiences should or should not look like. And so I think like if you are queer and if you are ace in particular, you are kind of forced, once you kind of reckon and kind of figure out like, oh yeah, like this is an identity that feels good for me. Maybe that's going to be tricky to kind of tell like a new date, for example, or my partner that I've been with for 50 years, right? Like everything in between. I think that if you're living in your truth and you're thinking, how do I have a healthy relationship with this person while also maintaining my truth and my identity, then like ace folks are kind of forced into becoming better communicators.
Yeah, and like, isn't that like the beautiful part of queerness to me, is that you're always sort of like, queerness means that you get to imagine new possibilities and new context and new ways of being. That's part of the deal. We really, if we're queer and you recognize yourself as a queer person, you can't fit yourself into the like heteronormative, allonormative, amatonormative boxes that exist for people. They're not built for that. World is not built for you. It's not built to imagine you. So you go and imagine the world that works for you. Imagine the relationships that work for you. It's like that beauty. Queerness means you get to make up the rules for yourself. And then like, if people who are in those heteronormative and allonormative boxes would like to listen, there's a lot to learn from that like active creation that's happening in queer lives.
Absolutely, Cody. Can't even agree with you more here. This has been really fun. I really enjoy talking to you. You are such a calm presence, and I really like your voice, so I really enjoy hearing you speak.
Thank you.
But our last segment is called Booty Call, and listeners can do a little voicemail, go to our link tree in our Instagram bio and click on the link that says Booty Call DB. And you can leave us a silly story. You can ask advice. You can kind of just share anything that's going on with your day, anything related to identity, relationships, sexuality. And we actually have an ACE related question that we're going to listen to.
Hey DB, what is the best course of action if my monogamous partner and I have very different sex drives? I very rarely want anything sexual, and I'm likely on the ACE spectrum. They have a pretty high sex drive and crave physical affection often. I'm getting kind of worried it's getting in the way of our relationship.
Okay, this is a really, really relevant question, I would say, for this episode, and something that we kind of mentioned earlier, right? Like if you are in a relationship with someone and you two have different ideas as to how much sex you do or do not want to have, what is kind of the response that ACE Dad Advice has here?
Well, first of all, like talk about it. Sex conversations in relationships are challenging and they can be difficult and feel awkward and uncomfortable, but you've got to get good at doing it. Just talk about it. You will never reach a sense of understanding together unless you have the hard conversation about what you want and what you don't want, and what that means for you as a couple. I often tell people, do your homework and get really clear on the things you absolutely do want to be part of your relationship in that physical sense. Be very clear about what you absolutely do not want, and then be clear about what could be on the table and negotiable and what that means. And if both people in the partnership do that, and then you sit down someplace separate from the negotiation of intimacy, like don't try to have this conversation when someone's like asking for some kind of intimacy. Do it on like a Saturday at a coffee shop somewhere, and just talk about those things. If you each share your yes, no's, and maybes in a non-threatening, non-stressful place, you will see where your wants and yeses overlap. You'll see where the maybes overlap. You'll see where the no's maybe conflict or overlap. And that's going to give you you'll be able to more confidently enter that space of like, how does this work if you have that conversation?
Yeah, I think like that's kind of the baseline, right? And I think that like something that might feel, at least for me, this would feel scary to hear, but like it's very possible that you two might not be a good fit, right? And like that is because once you do have that conversation and figure out, okay, what are some non-negotiables for me? What are things that maybe feel like I can meet you in the middle? And where can I kind of meet you exactly where you're at? And it is possible that like your partner will say like, actually, like it's really important to me to have a partner where we engage in sexual intercourse or in some sort of play together at least once every other week, right? Like if they come to the table and they say that and you're like, I get that, but I just really am not interested in that, then I think you kind of have your answer. And I think that that is really shitty to say out loud. And I am not a relationship expert or a therapist. However, I just think that if you are really honest with each other and get to a point where you're actually recognizing that you just don't fit anymore, I think a couple of other options on the table other than potentially parting is like, what does an open relationship look like? Like, is it possible for someone else to meet those needs for that person if that's not something that you're able or wanting to do? And if the answer is still no on that, then like, I think it's okay to confront the reality that you might not be a good pair.
And inside that is just also the reminder that for the ACE partner, it isn't just that you as the ACE partner are not meeting the needs of your allo partner, but the reverse is true
Both.
too. Like if you
Yes.
can't make that work out, then that person is not meeting your needs as an ACE person in a relationship. So you deserve your needs to be met as well. It isn't like you have to like leave that situation. If that is what you two mutually decide, you don't have to leave that feeling like you messed it up or like you screwed up the relationship. That relationship also didn't meet your needs. And we as ACE folks deserve our needs to be met, even if they are not the conventional needs that other relationships might have.
Yes, I'm so glad that you included that framework. I should have said that more clearly before, but you're both not a good pair, meaning like you both don't meet each other's needs. And it is really important that you don't see it as, oh, this is just like, I can't be enough for you. This is like we are not compatible, and that's okay. And there is nothing wrong with you whatsoever.
No, like most relationships don't work out. Most of the relationships we have don't work out. Like it's okay for that. Not, if your needs aren't getting met, it's okay to say this isn't going to be quite the thing for me. We have to maybe find some other way to relate to each other or some other way to be in each other's lives. But this isn't the way that's going to work for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that I imagine there's a lot of pressure for ACE folks to say like, well, if I'm not performing, then like who's going to want to be with me, or kind of like, how am I going to find someone? And I think that if you are honest and open about your boundaries and about the way in which you want to engage or not engage in the act of sex or anything related to sex, then there are plenty of other people who also feel the same as you and who want to engage or not engage as much or as little as you do.
Yeah, I wish that more ACE folks didn't see their wants and needs as preventing someone else from getting what they want, but like asking for what they want. You're just asking for what you want and need. You're not preventing someone from getting something. You're seeking the thing that you want, which you have a right to do. You deserve that.
Oh, Cody, just so gentle parenting I just received in a great way. And I really loved it from Ace Dad Advice. Cody, thank you so much for being on today. It is such a pleasure to talk to you and to learn from you. And I'm really, really glad that we have an ACE specific episode that folks can always refer back to. We also have a past episode from Daniel Walker, YouTuber and ACE person who also is an advocate and an activist. So if you want more ACE content, make sure to go back to that episode. But Cody, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I had the best time. Thanks.
Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel. Our communications lead is Catherine Cohen. Our producer is Sadie Leegee. Our marketing coordinator is Mitch Coburn. Our social media coordinator is M. Kirsty Frazier. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. Do you have a silly sex story to share, need some advice, or have thoughts on the episode you just heard? Give us a booty call for a chance to be featured on the podcast. Check the show notes for the details. For more sex ed content, follow us on IG at sexedwithdb podcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. Want to know your sex toy zodiac sign? Go to our link tree on our IG now. See you next time.